The starting tips I usually give to students is that, first of all, research is great fun. I love it because you find out things that nobody else knows. You get to go and see what everybody else in a field has written. It should be active and not passive. I think too often students research in a passive mode. They just go out and find something on JSTOR or Galileo and start reading it, but they aren't engaged with the material, and so they're not finding the best sources. And so when we're talking about October 6th, the research and the sources on October 20th, and citations, we'll be talking more about different sources you can go to. One of the best is the research librarians. They can help you with anything. We have special issues. You can always look at your bibliographies in there. You can enter various variations of terms. Like yesterday, I had someone wanting to do gender issues in indigenous cultures. So I had them enter Native American and sexuality, Native American and gender, American Indian and sexuality, American Indian and gender, indigenous and sexuality, and indigenous and gender. And then we had some others that came up, like Two-Spirit and that kind of thing. So if you are working on variations of terms, and for my students, and I know this differs, but in the humanities and philosophy and religious studies, I usually tell them to think of a broad topic. Don't think of your thesis statement yet, but go out and think of a broad topic, such as, I don't know, Kierkegaard's idea on self. And then see what's out there first. Before you decide exactly what you're going to write on, you need to do the research. So you read several papers. If you are told you need 8, I would probably pull 10 to 12, maybe 15, because some of them you're going to want to throw out. So after reading those papers, then work on formulating your thesis statement, which in the humanities, your thesis statement is going to be the conclusion you came to after you did your research. And that's going to help a bit as far as narrowing things down, because again, students often get too broad in their subjects. They want to do all of the problem of evil, which you can't do. So you have to make sure that you are narrowing your topic, keeping things under control for what time you have. So if you only have 17 weeks to get this done, you can't tackle a huge topic. You need to narrow it down a little bit. And again, do that only after you're researching. Every discipline is going to have a different methodology, and we hope to get more professors in here to talk about the methodology. So for some social sciences, you're going to have a question. You're going to have to form hypotheses. And to know your methodology, you need to talk to your professors. You can look online for some different discussions on methodologies. And to be able to use those, you need to know sort of the assumptions that your discipline makes, the major theories on the topic in your discipline. Because if we're talking about acid rain, for example, if you're in the social sciences and say you're in sociology, you're going to approach the question of acid rain differently than if you're in the sciences, say physics. And even if you're going into law or political science, you'll address it differently. There will be different questions, different types of questions that will be asked. So as you're going through and having these discussions, you want to be in active conversation with your sources, meaning that you want to look at the biases of your sources, what theories they're using, what assumptions they're making, because different assumptions will give you different results. So yesterday I was having a class on existentialism, and one of the students was talking about how he was approaching Dostoevsky's work from the position of power and anarchy. And that's a legitimate way to approach it. It just wasn't the existentialist way of approaching it. And so we discussed the fact that what we needed to do in that class was look at the existentialist way of approaching Dostoevsky, which is going to be a look particularly at the Grand Inquisitor in terms of free will and determinism and the phenomenological experience of that, which is a very different discussion than the discussion on power and anarchy. Both equally good, but notice that the different assumptions being made, the different questions being asked, is going to lead you to very different conversations. So you want to look at those in terms of yourself. What are your biases? What are your questions? But also in terms of what your papers are telling you when you go to read the research. If you're not sure, one of the best things you can do is go over to the library and go down to the journals on the bottom floor and pick up a journal in your area and look at what they use. Look at the methodology. Now, journals will differ even within a given discipline, but it gives you an idea of how the people in your discipline are writing. What's the verbiage they're using? What tone are they using? Are they more formal or informal? And again, that may be a journal-specific type of deal, but it gives you an idea of how people are working in your area. You also need to know that certain things we're not going to allow. We have a difference between essays and research papers. K through 12, they mostly teach you essays. Research papers are more formal. They use third person. They tend to not use fallacies. They are not about your feelings and emotions and opinions so much as they are about the research that you're doing. Now, individual professors may say that you can add your opinion or want your opinion in there. That varies from professor to professor. But say in logic and philosophy, we generally don't want opinion. We want to know what the experts are saying on the topic. And being able to put those experts into conversations by saying, this expert has this foundational assumption and this expert has this foundational assumption, explains why they come to different conclusions in the end. So when you're analyzing something, text, you're not just analyzing by going through and reading and picking out this phrase because it's a nice phrase. I like this phrase. You're not just telling me about what those people said. You're looking at the conversation they're in, what direction they're coming from, and why they are basing their conclusions on assumptions X, Y, and Z, or on this theory versus this theory. What is the difference? So if we're doing something on race, class, gender, sexuality, depending upon your original assumptions, you're going to get very different arguments on multiculturalism. So if you go with the neoliberal model of multiculturalism, it's very narrow. It is very much outsider to the inside, so it looks from an outsider position on groups and demographics that are labeled minority, and oftentimes limits the way that these different cultural demographics can express themselves. If you go more with the critical theorists and even critical race theorists, you're going to get a very different set of opinions, biases, assumptions, and theories that are being used. And if you're not careful, you're not in the same conversation, or you end up fighting instead of discussing. In order to do really good research, you'll want to go out and research all sides of the topic so that you know your opponent's research as well as your own. And in that way, you can counter the opponent. And countering an opponent means knowing their argument, finding the deficiencies in their argument, and explaining those, whether they're fallacies, whether they use an improper source. You need to be able to do that. To do that, you have to be actively involved in the conversation. You're not going to be able to just look at a paper and magically figure out what's wrong with it. You're going to have to sit there and become involved in it. And you have to give your opponent the benefit of the doubt. You don't get to say that because this person doesn't agree with me, they're just dumb. You're going to have to at least consider the fact that they do have credentials. They do have research on their side. They know what they're talking about. And so they are expressing a legitimate opinion, albeit one you don't agree with. By taking that stand, you can get in there and find out all the areas of their theories, all the assumptions, all the inferences they're making. And then you have a better shot at really defeating their argument. But you never defeat an argument by creating a fallacy, by calling someone a fascist or a liberal. That never defeats an argument. That's simply a fallacy. It's a fallacious way of reasoning. And usually it's done because the person doesn't have a good argument, and so is simply trying to manipulate your emotions to get you to agree with them. So there are all kinds of tricks of the trade that go into research, and hopefully the series will begin to develop into something that gives you the tricks of the trade and easy ways to do it. Since we're all in academia, we all have to publish. So helping you along the way can be as much as saying, hey, I know this good publisher for this article. Or if you want to get this published, this is what we need to do. And that's what the council is wanting to start doing. I'm going to leave it with that because we've got other things to do next time. But if there are any questions, we're open to questions or discussions. Dr. Knowles, you have anything to add?
No, Dr. Lovern, I believe that was fairly thorough. If any students that are listening in archive or otherwise have any research question as regards to social sciences, I'm available to you. I'm over in sociology, anthropology, criminal justice, and I'm the chair of Native American and Indigenous Studies. And I'm happy to entertain any research questions any of you may have. I'll try to point you on the proper path as it relates to social sciences. So just contact me if you will.
Yeah, and I have to say that a real good example is you may have to be collaborating with people. And Dr. Knowles and I wrote a book together. And of course, I come from the humanities. He comes from the social sciences, completely different methodologies. And it was interesting to try and integrate those methodologies. So those who are in interdisciplinary studies or integrative studies, you're really going to be doing something quite unique. And the integration of different methodologies can lead you to a brand new field of knowledge, a brand new way of looking at things. And that's where research really becomes exciting. I will say that we're all available if anybody has questions or wants to email later. We will be meeting next time on October 6th from 12 to 1. It's the Tuesday. And we'll be talking about researching with the library, but honestly, we'll answer any questions you have. You can find our archives information as well as stuff from last year's symposium on our YouTube and at VTEX. You can also make an appointment for reference help with our reference librarian. Oh, thank you, Danielle, for putting that up. So we have all kinds of resources for anybody at any level of research, beginning, advanced, graduate. What we want to do is start building a community that gives people a place to go if they have questions or to get started. And that's what we're after. So let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time. Look forward to seeing you next time.